In the world of medicine, trust is everything. Patients place their lives and well-being in the hands of professionals, believing in their oath to heal, protect, and guide. But what happens when those very hands betray the trust they're meant to uphold? What happens when a respected name in the community becomes a source of devastation? Today we delve into the story of Dr. Elias Braxton, a gynecologist known for his calm demeanor and celebrated track record. But beneath his pristine reputation lay a history that had gone unchallenged, an allegation dismissed, a boundary quietly crossed, and a dangerous pattern left unchecked. This is the story of 19-year-old Ayanna Pierce, a vibrant young woman with her whole life ahead of her, whose visit to Dr. Braxton's office was meant to be a step toward better health. Instead, it became the beginning of a path she could never have foreseen, a path marked by manipulation, broken trust, and devastating loss. Ayanna's mother, Patrice Pierce, had always been her rock, guiding her through every challenge. When Ayanna began experiencing troubling symptoms, Patrice turned to a trusted professional in their community, believing she was securing the best care for her daughter. But what neither Patrice nor Ayanna could have known was that this trusted space would become a setting for unimaginable consequences. The doctor they believed in would cross boundaries that should never be crossed, leading Ayanna down a road of confusion and vulnerability. When the truth began to unravel, it left not only the Pierce family shattered, but also exposed a system that had failed to act when it mattered most. How do we ensure that trusted spaces remain safe for those who seek care? Join me as we uncover the layers of a story that highlights the fragility of trust, the impact of power misused, and the quest for justice in the face of betrayal. This is the story of Ayanna Pierce, Dr. Elias Braxton, and the events that forever altered the lives of those they touched. Meet Ayanna Pierce, a 17-year-old whose life, like many young women her age, was filled with dreams and aspirations. A warm and kind-hearted young woman, Ayanna had a love for music, often spending her evenings strumming her guitar in her bedroom. But beneath her vibrant exterior, she was quietly struggling with something she didn't fully understand: hormonal imbalances that left her feeling tired, irritable, and out of sync with herself. Her symptoms had begun to interfere with her daily life, making even the simplest tasks seem daunting. Concerned for her well-being, Ayanna confided in her mother, Patrice Pierce. Patrice, a single mother and pillar of strength for her family, had always been deeply attuned to her children's needs. Ayanna was her youngest, and Patrice saw it as her mission to ensure her daughter had every opportunity for a healthy and bright future. The Pierce family was a tight-knit, middle-class household living in a modest but comfortable home. Patrice had worked tirelessly to create a stable environment for her children, emphasizing the importance of education, respect, and self-care. Despite their challenges, the family shared a deep bond that gave Ayanna a sense of security and love. When Ayanna's symptoms became too concerning to ignore, Patrice didn't hesitate to take action. She began researching local specialists and asking for recommendations from trusted friends. That's when she heard about Dr. Elias Braxton, a highly regarded gynecologist known for his professionalism and thoughtful approach to patient care. Dr. Braxton's name came with glowing reviews. He was praised for listening to his patients, taking time to explain complex issues, and offering solutions that made them feel at ease. To Patrice, he seemed like the perfect person to guide Ayanna through her health challenges. With a mother's determination to ensure her child received the best care, Patrice scheduled an appointment with him without hesitation. For Ayanna, this felt like a step in the right direction, a chance to understand her body better and regain control of her life. She trusted her mother's judgment and was relieved that someone as experienced as Dr. Braxton would be addressing her concerns. The Pierce family approached this journey with cautious optimism. They were navigating a healthcare system that often felt overwhelming, but Patrice's proactive approach gave Ayanna confidence. They trusted in the process and placed their faith in a well-regarded professional, never imagining that this decision would become the beginning of their greatest nightmare. Dr. Elias Braxton was a name synonymous with trust in the community. As a gynecologist with over a decade of experience, he was known for his calm demeanor and unwavering professionalism. Patients often remarked on his ability to make them feel comfortable, even in the most vulnerable situations. His office walls were adorned with certificates of achievement and photographs of community outreach programs he had participated in, visible reminders of a career built on service and care. For many families like the Pierces, Dr. Braxton seemed like the ideal choice. His reputation as a meticulous and empathetic doctor preceded him, and word of mouth often brought new patients through his doors. He was celebrated for his thoroughness, his ability to explain complex medical issues in simple terms, and his willingness to spend extra time with patients who needed reassurance. On the surface, Dr. Braxton's record appeared impeccable. He was a cornerstone of the medical community, often praised for his commitment to his profession, but reputations can be deceiving. Years earlier, a troubling accusation had surfaced. A mother claimed that Dr. Braxton had acted inappropriately toward her teenage daughter during a series of medical appointments. The claim sent shockwaves through the community, briefly casting doubt on the man so many had trusted. However, after a thorough investigation, no substantial evidence was found to support the allegations. The case was dismissed, and Dr. Braxton was cleared to continue his practice. Despite this resolution, the whispers didn't completely fade. For some, the lack of evidence wasn't the same as proof of innocence. The incident left an invisible stain on his otherwise pristine reputation, a quiet reminder that not all questions had clear answers. Dr. Braxton returned to his work, and over time, the doubts faded into the background. Patients continued to seek his care, and his name once again became synonymous with trust and expertise. But for those who remembered the past, a gradual unease lingered. In the Pierce family's eyes, however, none of this was visible. They saw only the calm, respected professional who had earned the admiration of his peers and patients alike. To Patrice and Ayanna, Dr. Braxton was the answer to their search for the best care, a guiding figure in their journey to health. Unbeknownst to them, the doubts that had once surrounded him would resurface in ways they could never have anticipated, and the man they trusted would reveal a side of himself that would change their lives forever. The day of the appointment arrived with a sense of cautious hope. Patrice Pierce and her daughter Ayanna stepped into the pristine waiting room of Dr. Elias Braxton's office. The space was calm and inviting, with soft lighting and walls lined with informational brochures. Patrice, ever the attentive mother, held her daughter's hand tightly, reassuring her that they were on the right path to finding answers. When Ayanna's name was called, the pair walked into the consultation room together. Dr. Braxton greeted them with a kind smile, his voice steady and reassuring. He introduced himself in a warm yet professional tone, immediately putting both mother and daughter at ease. Ayanna, who had been feeling nervous about discussing her symptoms, found herself opening up under his gentle questioning. The consultation was thorough. Dr. Braxton asked detailed questions about Ayanna's health history, her symptoms, and how they had been affecting her daily life. With each response, he nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes and explaining his thought process in terms both mother and daughter could understand. It was clear why so many patients spoke highly of him. After a physical examination, Dr. Braxton discussed his initial findings. He explained that hormonal imbalances were not uncommon and outlined a plan of action, which included further tests to pinpoint the underlying cause. His tone was confident yet empathetic, assuring Ayanna that they would work together to resolve her concerns. Patrice felt a wave of relief as she listened. This was the kind of care she had hoped for, a doctor who not only addressed their concerns, but also treated them with respect and understanding. As the appointment came to a close, Dr. Braxton scheduled a follow-up visit to review the test results and discuss next steps. But life has a way of complicating even the most well-laid plans. On the day of the follow-up appointment, Patrice found herself in the middle of a work emergency. Knowing how important it was for Ayanna to continue her care, she urged her daughter to go alone. Ayanna hesitated at first. She had always relied on her mother to navigate these situations, but Patrice assured her that everything would be fine. After all, Dr. Braxton had made them feel like they were in good hands. Reluctantly, Ayanna agreed. She left the house that day determined to take charge of her health, unaware that this seemingly routine visit would mark the beginning of a life-altering series of events. For Patrice, it was just another busy day at work, but for Ayanna, It was a step into the unknown. Ayanna arrived at her second appointment alone, a little nervous, but determined. The same calm atmosphere greeted her as she entered the clinic. And soon enough, she found herself sitting across from Dr. Braxton once again. His demeanor was, as always, warm and professional, but this time, there was something different about the interaction, something that Ayanna, in her youth and inexperience, didn't quite notice. The appointment began as expected. Dr. Braxton reviewed her test results, offering reassurances that her condition could be managed with the right treatment plan. He spoke with the same steady confidence that had put both her and her mother at ease before, but as the conversation continued, it began to shift. Dr. Braxton asked Ayanna about her personal life, her hobbies, and her feelings about school and friends. At first, it seemed like friendly conversation, an effort to make her feel more comfortable. But his questions soon became more specific, more personal. He complimented her maturity and intelligence, telling her how rare it was to see someone so composed at her age. Ayanna, who was often shy and unsure of herself, found these words flattering. As the appointment came to an end, Dr. Braxton hesitated for a moment before speaking again. He explained that her treatment might require ongoing support, and if she ever had concerns outside of office hours, she could reach him directly. He handed her a card with his number, smiling in a way that felt reassuring at the time. Ayanna left the office feeling cared for and grateful. To her, the gesture seemed thoughtful, even kind. She couldn't have known that this was the first step in a carefully calculated effort to gain her trust. What began as occasional text messages about her treatment soon grew into regular conversations. At first, the messages were brief, questions about how she was feeling, reminders to follow her treatment plan. But over time, the tone of the messages changed. Dr. Braxton began asking about her day, her interests, and her dreams for the future. He spoke about himself as well, painting a picture of a man who was kind, understanding, and, most notably, alone. He told Ayanna that he was divorced and had no one to share his life with. To a young woman already feeling vulnerable and isolated by her health challenges, this connection felt meaningful. She began to see him not just as a doctor, but as a trusted confidant, someone who truly cared about her. But trust can be a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands. Ayanna didn't recognize the manipulation at play. She didn't see how her vulnerability was being used against her, or how the lines between professional care and personal interest were being deliberately blurred. For Dr. Braxton, every message, every conversation was a step closer to breaking down the barriers that should have protected her. For Ayanna, it was the beginning of a connection she believed was genuine, but in reality, it was anything but. By the time Ayanna realized how deeply she had become entangled in this relationship, it was already too late to see the full scope of the danger ahead. How do you recognize when a line has been crossed? At what point does professional care turn into something far more personal, far more dangerous? For Ayanna Pierce, that moment had already passed, though she didn't yet see it. What started as regular medical appointments had transformed into something Ayanna couldn't quite define. Dr. Braxton, who once maintained a professional distance, had drawn her into his world. Their private meetings became frequent under the guise of monitoring her progress, and their conversations drifted far from medical topics. It began gradually. He would ask about her personal life, about her fears, her dreams, and the things she kept hidden from others. Over time, he began to reveal parts of his own life, crafting a story that painted him as misunderstood, lonely, and compassionate. He told Ayanna he was divorced, that he was navigating life alone, and that he admired her for her strength and resilience. For a 17-year-old struggling with hormonal imbalances and self-doubt, his attention felt like validation. Ayanna, who had always been quiet and unsure of herself, started to feel seen in ways she never had before. Slowly, her dependency on him grew, and she began to view him as more than just a doctor. The affair evolved in private, away from prying eyes. Dr. Braxton made sure of it, warning Ayanna that others wouldn't understand the connection they shared. He convinced her to keep it a secret, framing their relationship as something special, something only the two of them could understand. Meanwhile, at home, Patrice Pierce began to notice changes in her daughter. Ayana, once open and chatty, had become more withdrawn, her mood shifting unpredictably. There were moments when she seemed happy, even glowing, and others when she was distant and lost in thought. Patrice, concerned, attributed it to the hormonal imbalance and the side effects of her medication. She chose not to press Ayana, wanting to give her space to navigate what she believed was a challenging but temporary phase. Ayana, unaware of how deeply she had been manipulated, continued to trust Dr. Braxton completely. She believed his words when he told her she was mature beyond her years. She believed him when he said their bond was different, that he cared about her in ways no one else ever could. She went deeper into the affair and relationship. To her, she was in love. To him, he was using and taking advantage of a young girl at her age. Then came the moment that changed everything. Ayana discovered she was pregnant. She'd been feeling different for weeks, waves of nausea, fatigue, and a gnawing sense that something was off. When the confirmation came, she was overwhelmed with fear. Her first instinct was to turn to the person she trusted most, Dr. Braxton. During one of their private meetings, she shared the news with him, her voice trembling. She explained her confusion and fear, how she didn't know what to do. Dr. Braxton's response was calm, almost unnervingly so. He reassured her that everything would be fine, that she had nothing to worry about. He promised her they would handle it together, telling her that she could count on him to protect her. Ayana believed him. She wanted to believe him. In her mind, their connection had always been built on trust and care, and this moment felt no different. She didn't question his intentions, even as he told her to keep the pregnancy a secret. He insisted it was for her own good, that they needed time to figure things out before involving anyone else. Back at home, Patrice noticed Ayana's behavior becoming even more erratic. She was distracted, often lost in thought, and seemed to avoid conversations about her health. Patrice dismissed her instincts, telling herself it was just the medication or the hormonal imbalance at play. She had no idea that her daughter's life was unraveling in ways far beyond her understanding. Ayana clung to Dr. Braxton's promises, hoping he would guide her through this unexpected and overwhelming challenge. What she didn't realize was that his plan was never about protecting her. It was about protecting himself, and the path he chose would lead to consequences neither of them could have imagined. It was a moment that should have been ordinary, a routine follow-up visit at a trusted doctor's office. Ayana Pierce, still reeling from the discovery of her pregnancy, had been assured by Dr. Braxton that everything would be handled discreetly and professionally. She clung to his words as she stepped into his office that day, desperate for guidance. Dr. Braxton greeted her with his usual calm demeanor, projecting an air of confidence and control. He reassured her once more, emphasizing that her health and well-being were his top priority. During their conversation, he handed her a drink, explaining that it was part of her treatment plan. He claimed it would help alleviate some of the discomfort she had been experiencing. Ayana hesitated for a brief moment, but his soothing tone and unwavering confidence dissolved her doubts. She trusted him implicitly, as she always had. She drank the mixture without question, grateful for what she believed was another step towards stability. The rest of the appointment proceeded uneventfully, with Dr. Braxton providing instructions for future care and reiterating his support. Ayana left his office feeling a fragile sense of hope, holding on to his promises as she returned home. At first, everything seemed normal. She went about her day trying to distract herself from the overwhelming emotions that had consumed her in recent weeks. But as the hours passed, something began to change. A dull ache in her abdomen grew sharper, spreading like wildfire through her body. By evening, the pain had escalated to unbearable levels, leaving Ayana doubled over and struggling to catch her breath. She tried to convince herself it was nothing, that the discomfort would pass, but deep down panic began to set in. Patrice Pierce immediately noticed her daughter's distress. Ayana, usually quiet about her struggles, was visibly in agony, clutching her stomach and grimacing with each breath. Alarmed, Patrice questioned her, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Ayana, disoriented and unable to articulate her pain, could only whisper that it had started hours after returning home. With her mother's instincts kicking into overdrive, Patrice didn't waste another moment. She helped Ayana into the car, driving as quickly as she could to the nearest hospital. Patrice's mind raced with possibilities, but none of them seemed to fit. Ayanna had appeared fine earlier that day. What could have caused such a sudden and violent change? By the time they reached the hospital, Ayanna's condition had worsened dramatically. Nurses and doctors rushed to her side, trying to stabilize her as Patrice watched helplessly, tears streaming down her face. She begged the medical staff for answers, desperate to understand what was happening to her daughter. Despite their efforts, Ayanna's body began to shut down. Within minutes of their arrival, she succumbed to the internal chaos that had overtaken her. Patrice's cries echoed through the sterile hospital halls as the devastating reality set in. The loss was immediate, shattering, and incomprehensible. Just hours earlier, Ayanna had been a vibrant young woman fighting to take control of her life. Now she was gone, leaving her mother grappling with a grief that words could never capture. As Patrice sat in the waiting room, numb and broken, questions began to swirl in her mind. What had happened? Why had her daughter's condition deteriorated so quickly? And most importantly, how could this have happened under the care of a trusted medical professional? These questions would soon take center stage as an investigation began, peeling back the layers of a tragedy that was anything but accidental. After Ayanna Pierce's sudden passing, the hospital was quiet, but the shock waves of her death had already begun to ripple. Patrice Pierce, consumed by grief, sat in silence, her mind racing with unanswered questions. How could her seemingly healthy daughter leave for a doctor's appointment and never return? The initial shock was unbearable, but what was to come would shake not just the Pierce family, but the entire community. The first step toward answers came with the autopsy. The medical examiner's findings revealed something Patrice couldn't have imagined, a substance in Ayanna's system that was not consistent with any prescribed treatment. This substance, one that required professional access, raised immediate red flags. Its presence painted a troubling picture, one that pointed directly at the medical professional entrusted with Ayanna's care. The findings didn't stop there. During the examination, another revelation surfaced. Ayanna had been pregnant. For Patrice, this discovery was like being hit by a second wave of devastation. She hadn't known. Ayanna hadn't told her. The pieces of the puzzle began to form, but none of it made sense. News of the findings quickly reached the authorities, and an investigation was launched. Detectives, trained to see patterns and uncover truths, started with Ayanna's digital trail. Her phone became a critical piece of evidence. As investigators combed through her messages, a story began to emerge, one of manipulation and betrayal. The text exchanges between Ayanna and Dr. Braxton revealed far more than anyone had expected. The initial messages seemed professional, focused on her medical care, but they soon turned personal, showing a level of familiarity that raised alarms. The messages painted a picture of a young woman being drawn into a relationship she believed was built on trust and care. There were assurances, promises of support, and gradual hints at secrecy. Investigators noted how Dr. Braxton's words seemed carefully chosen, designed to gain Ayanna's trust while keeping others in the dark. The discovery of these messages provided not only a clearer understanding of the dynamics at play, but also a direct link between Ayanna's death and the doctor she had trusted so deeply. For the Pierce family, this revelation was both a step closer to justice and a bitter confirmation of their worst fears. Word of the investigation spread quickly, reaching the broader community. The shock was palpable. Dr. Braxton, a man who had been a pillar of trust and professionalism, was now at the center of a growing scandal. Patients who had once praised his care began to question everything. How could this have happened? How could a doctor with years of experience and a seemingly spotless reputation be connected to something so tragic? The questions loomed large, and the community, once confident in their healthcare system, was left reeling. As the investigation deepened, more troubling details would come to light, revealing a pattern of behavior that had gone unnoticed for far too long. But for Patrice, the only focus was on finding the truth, for her daughter, for her family, and for the justice Ayanna so desperately deserved. The investigation into Ayanna Pierce's tragic death did more than uncover one shocking truth. It began to unravel a web of hidden stories, each more unsettling than the last. As authorities dug deeper into Dr. Elias Braxton's professional history, the once revered gynecologist started to look less like a pillar of the community and more like a man who had been operating under a carefully constructed facade. The breakthrough came when the news of Ayana's case reached the public. Women who had once been silent began to speak out, their voices trembling with long-suppressed fear and frustration. One by one, they recounted experiences that echoed a disturbing pattern: visits to Dr. Braxton that had crossed professional boundaries, conversations that felt inappropriate, and moments of discomfort they couldn't articulate at the time. For some, the memories were vague and fragmented, a comment here, an unusual request there. But for others, the recollections were painfully clear. A former patient came forward, revealing how Dr. Braxton had initiated personal conversations during her appointments, making her feel uneasy, but unsure how to respond. Another described how he had insisted on follow-up visits for minor concerns, only to later suggest meetings outside the office. As these accounts began to pile up, a grim picture started to emerge. What had once been dismissed as isolated incidents were now seen as part of a larger pattern, one that showed a clear misuse of authority and trust. Dr. Braxton, it seemed, had been exploiting the vulnerability of his patients, using his position to manipulate those who had come to him for care. The revelations hit the community like a tidal wave. The same people who had once sung his praises were now grappling with feelings of betrayal and disbelief. Patients who had trusted him implicitly were left questioning every interaction they'd ever had with him. Mothers who had recommended him to their daughters felt a deep sense of guilt, wondering if they had unknowingly put their loved ones in harm's way. In the Pierce family's neighborhood, the story became the sole topic of conversation. Ayana's name was spoken in hushed tones, her story a reminder of how easily trust could be shattered. Patrice, already burdened with grief, found herself at the center of a growing storm. Neighbors approached her with condolences and questions, their faces etched with concern and fear. Dr. Braxton's colleagues, too, were forced to confront the truth. Many had considered him a friend, a mentor, or a trusted ally in the medical field. Now, they were left questioning how they had missed the signs, how someone they had worked alongside for years could have hidden so much. The outrage was palpable. The community, once united in their admiration for Dr. Braxton, was now united in their demand for accountability. Protests formed outside his clinic, patients demanded answers, and his name became synonymous with betrayal. As more stories surfaced, it became clear that Ayana was not an isolated case. Her tragic death had opened the floodgates, bringing to light a history of unchecked behavior that had gone unnoticed or unchallenged for far too long. For many, the question remained, how had this been allowed to happen? And for the Pierce family, the pursuit of justice became more than a personal mission. It became a fight for every victim who had been silenced and for every life that could still be protected. When the evidence against Dr. Elias Braxton became undeniable, the moment that many in the community had been waiting for finally arrived: his arrest. On a quiet morning, law enforcement officers arrived at his home, their presence shattering the illusion of respectability he had so carefully maintained. Dr. Braxton, calm and collected as always, offered no resistance, but the weight of the moment was undeniable. For the Pierce family and the growing list of others affected by his actions, it was the first tangible step toward justice. The investigation had already revealed far more than anyone expected. Ayana's messages and the autopsy results were damning on their own, but the additional testimonies from other patients painted an even graver picture. Investigators uncovered years of manipulation, inappropriate behavior, and a clear misuse of professional authority. Each piece of evidence added another layer to the case, making it increasingly difficult for Dr. Braxton to deny his role in Ayana's tragic death. When the trial began, the courtroom was filled with a mix of somber silence and quiet tension. Patrice Pierce sat in the front row, flanked by family and supporters, her face etched with grief and determination. She had vowed to see this through, not just for Ayana, but for every young woman who had been affected by Dr. Braxton's actions. The prosecution's case was methodical and relentless. They presented the text messages between Ayana and Dr. Braxton, highlighting the manipulation and emotional control he had exerted over her. They brought in medical experts to testify about the substance found in Ayana's system, explaining how it could only have been accessed by someone with Dr. Braxton's credentials. Investigators detailed the timeline of events, from Ayana's initial visit to the tragic day she died. Their testimony left little room for doubt, painting a clear picture of a man who had used his position not to heal, but to harm. The defense, however, attempted to shift the narrative. They argued that Dr. Braxton's actions were misunderstood, that he had only ever tried to help Ayana feel cared for and supported. In his own statement, Dr. Braxton showed no remorse. Instead, he claimed that his relationship with Ayana had been one of mutual understanding, and that he had acted out of a desire to make her feel valued. His words rang hollow to those in the courtroom, especially Patrice. To her, this was not a man who had made a mistake. This was someone who had deliberately exploited her daughter's vulnerability and then tried to justify his actions as something noble. The prosecution wasted no time dismantling the defense's arguments, focusing on Dr. Braxton's blatant ethical breaches and the trail of evidence that left no room for misinterpretation. They called on other victims to testify, their stories echoing Ayana's in chilling detail. When the verdict was finally delivered, the courtroom was silent. Dr. Braxton was found guilty on multiple counts, including medical negligence, unlawful distribution of a controlled substance, and gross ethical misconduct. The judge, acknowledging the gravity of his actions and their impact on the community, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole only after serving 40 years. For Patrice and her family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, though it could never erase the pain of losing Ayana. Standing outside the courthouse, Patrice spoke to reporters, her voice steady but emotional. She called for systemic change, for stricter oversight of medical professionals, and for more resources to protect patients from those who might misuse their authority. The case left an indelible mark on the community. Dr. Braxton, once a symbol of trust, became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even those in the highest positions must be held accountable for their actions. And for the Pierce family, though the road to justice had been long and painful, their unwavering commitment ensured that Ayana's story would not be forgotten. As Patrice Pierce put it, "We couldn't save Ayana, but we can make sure no other family has to endure what we have. Her story is her legacy, and it will stand as a testament to the strength it takes to fight for what's right, even in the face of unimaginable loss." The loss of Ayana Pierce was a tragedy that no family should ever have to endure. For Patrice Pierce, the journey through grief became a mission to honor her daughter's memory. She turned her pain into advocacy, speaking out about the importance of patient safety, parental involvement, and accountability within professional spaces. This case also exposed systemic issues that allowed a trusted individual to misuse their authority. It highlighted the urgent need for stricter oversight, better communication between families and professionals, and a culture that encourages young people to speak up when something feels wrong. Parents, too, were reminded of the importance of staying engaged, even when challenges seem routine or minor. Trust is vital, but it must always be paired with vigilance. Stories like Ayana's remind us of the fragile balance between trust and safety. They call on us to remain attentive to the spaces and relationships that should be safe havens. As parents, as teens, as a community, how do we ensure that justice is upheld and that healing spaces remain just that, spaces for healing? This story serves as a somber reminder to prioritize open communication and advocacy, not just for ourselves, but for those we care about. Let Ayana's story inspire action, awareness, and the kind of change that ensures no one else has to endure such a loss. If you found this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more content that sheds light on real-life lessons and the steps we can take to build safer, stronger communities.